This episode of the PC Perspective podcast is brought to you by Casper, a sleep brand that continues to revolutionize its line of products to create an exceptionally comfortable sleep experience one night at a time. Get $50 off select mattresses by visiting casper.com/PCPer and using promo code PCPer at checkout. Hey folks, before we get started tonight, just a quick message. We know there's been a lot of changes. We know that some new faces, some different roles, and we appreciate your feedback, and we hope you keep giving it to us so that we can improve. And part of that feedback I received last week, and it was genuinely well-intentioned feedback, was that I'm no fun. Just, it's like NPR computer talk, and I appreciate that, and I'm going to try. I can't promise anything. I'm really going to try. But in that spirit... Oh, shit! Welcome to the PC Perspective podcast, episode 521, being recorded November 7th, 2018.
Ken was not prepared for that, and neither were any of us.
Nice. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted the genuine reaction.
Oh, that was beautiful.
I'll clean it up after the show.
Gonna clean it out of my MacBook keyboard that is prone to jamming.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. We're good. We're good. So,
well, I can't hear out of my
I was really hoping we'd go for the NPR thing because I've been practicing my NPR voice, and so today at 12:30 we'll be discussing the things that mean a lot to me. And now, some light jazz.
Listen. I was half expecting Sam Kennison breakout.
I knew it wasn't going to be good because he was hiding something over there.
Yeah.
I was not expecting to be deafened.
All right. Well, like I said, I'm Jim Tanis, and joining us today, we also have the rest of the crew.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm NPR Josh Walrath.
I'm Allyn Malventano. Oh, whoops.
On camera.
Damn it.
You talked over me, Allyn.
Oh. Who's that guy?
I'm Sebastian. Peak.
Yeah, and I'm Allyn over here.
I'm Alex.
And there's Alex intruding onto Sebastian's turf.
I'm
sorry.
Confused.
And covered in glitter,
I'm
Ken Addison.
Shell-shocked.
My ears.
I want to see a slow frame by frame of Ken's reaction to when that thing went off.
I don't.
Well, welcome to the show, folks. So we record every Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. You can join us live at pcper.com/live. We have the IRC chat, and we try to interact with you as best we can through that. Or you can catch us after the fact, pcper.com/podcast, where you can watch all the shows. To be notified when we go live so you don't miss stuff like that, because Ken's going to probably edit that out of the final episode. But
this episode's never going up.
This will never air. The lost episode. But head to pcper.com/subscribe where you can enter your email. It's a plain text email. We send it out just before we go live just to remind you. And that way you never miss anything fun. Also, you can join us at patreon.com/pcper to help us do what we do here. We've changed the graphic this week to more accurately reflect the situation here. We've got someone fading away and then some sort of pervert hiding behind the couch.
That's nice placement.
So if consider joining us there to help us hire a graphic designer. One of the things that Patreon helps us do is our mailbag, and we mentioned last week that we were looking for questions to get that started again. We've got probably 7 questions now for Allyn. And probably room for a couple more. So if he'll be doing it, he'll be recording that tomorrow. So please get those questions in. You can leave a comment on the most recent YouTube video for the mailbag. You can send a tweet to our PCPer handle or to Allyn directly, or just email. Just leave a comment on this video, whatever. Just get it to us, and we'll try to get Allyn to answer that for you. And, of course, finally, we have joshtech.com, which is our own merchandise store, where you can find all of our favorite slogans, logos. We've got beautiful mugs with Josh Tech there and the racing wheel, I guess. All the purchases there. You get something cool. We get a little cut. Helps us out here. Appreciate it. So check that out, joshtech.com. All right, let's jump right into the reviews.
I'm going to be finding glitter in this keyboard for months to come.
Months.
We got compressed air and vacuum cleaners.
The chat was saying, "Oh no, it's just confetti." Don't be fooled. There's glitter.
There's glitter. I can see there's some glistening off of Jim's forehead as well. I noticed.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's shiny like a vampire.
But joining us this week, of course, Sebastian Peak, one of our reviewers, and he's got a couple reviews for us. So the first up is some new all-in-one water coolers from Corsair.
That's right. And not too long ago, I did the H100 Pro, I believe it was, review, which was kind of the new design for Corsair's coolers after just some incremental improvements for the last few years. A little bit of a different design for the radiator itself, kind of a different aesthetic, but some different fans, revised mounting hardware. Of course, these all now support AM4 out of the box. This one is a little bit different still, and this is the H100 or 115i Platinum. Now, the Platinum, I am assuming, is because this is the extra special deluxe version, which not only has RGB lighting effects on the pump assembly, but also the fans. The ML Pro RGB 140 millimeter PWM fans, which I'm trying to remember the actual bearing type these use because somehow I missed that on these specifications, but they're very, very, very quiet fans. And they also have multi-zone LED lighting built into them. So if you notice from the pictures, or I guess there's one picture I took of them in action towards the bottom of the review there, each of the fans has 4 different lights which can shine different colors at any given time. I left it on the default spiral rainbow effect. But anyhow, the takeaway for this cooler was the revised hardware feels nicer. It's a little bit stronger. Gone is the plastic backplate if you're using an Intel like 1155, 5X, whatever socket. You actually get a metal backplate now. All of the hardware felt just a little bit better. And this thing is extremely quiet. The benchmarks I ran with my standard test bench that I use for enclosure testing and coolers here is an i7 7700K, which is an extremely hot processor. And mine, I don't know if it's sample specific or what, but mine has always just been toasty. So it's a very good test of coolers, even at without overclocking. Routinely, I get warmer temps with enclosure testing from my CPU than I do from the GPU that I use. And temperatures were fine.
Is that some sweet feedback coming back in your setup, or do you have crickets chirping in the background?
I think it's
don't you mind? I mean, I like crickets. It's very relaxing.
I think it's actually my squeaking, whatever the part is that rotates on my furnace, which is apparently running right now.
That's a fan.
That's a fan.
You
got some Corsair ones. Yeah, you should replace that fan with one of those Corsair ones.
I just need to oil.
Damn it, it's not cooling my furnace. Everybody needs an RGB furnace.
I need a magnetic levitation bearing like these Corsair fans have in my furnace. Is the noise too distracting? Should I wait it out?
No, just keep going.
I can just walk over there and hit the switch or pull the fuse out.
That's not how you're supposed to.
We're talking about performance.
We're talking
about cooler performance. Now, I compared it briefly just against the H100i Pro that I had reviewed, and actually the numbers were not that impressive compared to its smaller counterpart. But what I determined during the testing was that they seem to be favoring silence over performance by their default presets. You can customize everything. I just ran with 3 of the default presets, and it also has a fanless mode, but I did not benchmark with that. It's fanless only at idle, essentially. So the biggest, if you're looking at the charts, the biggest gap you're going to see is when you go up to the extreme preset, which is where you really get into like the full capabilities of these coolers. And so with the pump running on full and the fans actually able to hit their maximum RPMs, this thing was 5 decibels quieter than the H100i. So like the highest I got was still just under 40 decibels at full load, all cores for an extended run. So this is a very, very quiet cooler. It's not as quiet as a giant tower air cooler can be, but as far as liquid coolers go, when you have to factor in the pump noise and the fan noise, and I measure equidistant between the two of them on an open test bench, and it was still only hitting 39.4 decibels. So very, very, very quiet. In the end, though, I had to. I mean, the LEDs, the RGB effects are cool if you're into that sort of thing. I know a lot of people have kind of RGB fatigue at this point, but it's there, and that makes it a more premium part. And without the new fans, which is like plain fans, this would probably be a little bit more affordable. But as it ships, it has a $169.99 MSRP, which is steep. So my takeaway,
you know, there's something here we're overlooking. If you can scroll back up,
yes,
and down. There, stop. Your photography is still on point.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks, Josh.
You're welcome.
It's embarrassing.
I mean, that composition, the bokeh, the focus. It's just. I mean, you can see
all
the
natural. You know,
you
what,
can see
Josh,
the RGB block just sitting behind it. You know, like anxiously, like a lover in the distance, anxiously awaiting the return of the open arms and Jim's.
I don't know where you're
big popper
with this. Josh, are you done?
You probably want some boudoir photos done at some point.
The judge warned you about
before
this.
the furnace noise started to about now. You know, I'm proud of that shot, Josh. I'm glad you brought it up. Let's talk about it. I'm using my Nikon 40mm micro lens on my D5100.
You know, it's nice.
Camera.
You can still see the fins, the cooling fins behind the nicely blurred fan blades. It's just
is a fast shutter speed, Josh, and a wide open aperture, just to bring in the light to enhance that natural bokeh effect.
Are we going to start putting subtitles on all our pictures for all the camera settings?
I can. Yeah.
Just do it in the float over text.
I'm just baffled Josh isn't going all double rainbow on that fan picture.
So Sebastian, the software, was that easy to configure?
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you asked that question, Jim, because Corsair is using IQ software for everything now. That at one point, I think, was just an optional thing with certain products. Now it's everything. So it shows up in the dashboard. You can click on it. You can adjust all of your presets as far as performance very quickly. And then once you have that tuned, you can go in and change the colors to your heart's content. I left it at defaults, but I've scrolled through and I tried it a few different patterns. And this is actually basically the same package as far as the fans and the color options that I saw with their most recent Crystal Series case, the 280X. You're getting essentially the same fans as the 280X, but with higher static pressure and all of those associated customizable color effects. So this would be a great choice to add to a case like that 280X. And if you have room for 280 millimeter all-in-one liquid cooler and you're thinking of going the liquid cooler route, this is the quietest one that I have personally tested. But you do need space for a 280, and 169 is expensive. So you're going to have to want those RGB effects, because otherwise they certainly have options available from the previous gen. They're a lot less expensive that do not have RGB fans.
Can you scroll back up to that picture? I have one more comment to make. Please?
This picture. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes. Sebastian.
What?
You are the Robert Mapplethorpe of PC hardware.
The who?
Oh my God. Have you never heard of Robert Mapplethorpe?
I was talking over you. I'm sorry, Josh.
Robert Mapplethorpe of PC hardware.
I still don't know who that is, which I apologize for.
Oh.
Just nod and smile.
Okay. Well, never mind.
All right. Well, that does
I guess I'm aging myself.
Yeah.
Weird.
Did you have any frustration with the extra cables? Because to get the RGBs on the header there, I mean, there's significantly more cabling than normal.
There is, and I have used a couple of these types of all-in-ones lately, so I didn't even think about it, but you do have like 4 cables coming off of the fans instead of 2, because there's a separate cable for the PWM fan header and for the RGB lighting. But, if you're kind of binding it all up and putting it behind the case, like behind the motherboard backplate anyway, it didn't really add any bulk of any significance. These are thin cables.
All right. Well, so good enough for a silver award. That's the Corsair H115i RGB Platinum 280 millimeter liquid all-in-one cooler. Thanks, Sebastian. Next up, we got
you're
review from Ken. This was a pair of products, video capture products, right?
Yeah. So I think I picked these for my pick of the week back over the summer, but we finally got our time to work through a couple of software bugs and post the full review. These are the AVerMedia Live Gamer Ultra and Live Gamer 4K capture cards. So there are two different units here. There's the Live Gamer 4K, which is the PCI Express by 4 card you see there, with the nicely designed shroud on it with a bunch of triangles cut into it. And that's actually a pretty good looking card. And then there's the Live Gamer Ultra, which is the USB-C connected external device there on the bottom. The capabilities of these differ a bit. The PCI Express card can do 4K 60, and more importantly, 4K 60 with HDR, which is the first time I've seen actual HDR capture on any consumer-grade capture card. There's high-end studio equipment that's thousands of dollars or, stuff like that, but this is kind of the first thing targeted at gamers. So you have your HDMI in, you have a pass-through, will also pass through HDR to your TV, so you can have a sort of zero input lag experience, so you don't have to game through the capture window, which would add a little bit of latency. Mm-hmm. There's RGB lighting, of course.
Yay, more RGB.
On the top, easily turned off in software if you're not into that, but it's a subtle effect and everything has to have RGB these days. The external device will only do 4K 30, no HDR. However, it does have a neat trick where it will still pass through HDR. So if you have your Xbox One X plugged into this, and then it's plugged into your PC, you can still enable HDR to view on your TV. You just won't be able to capture HDR.
Oh, that's good.
So you don't have to downgrade your sort of visual experience to capture your gameplay to stream it or record it. The software component of this is AVerMedia's Rec Central, which I haven't used in a couple of years, but it's actually a pretty nice piece of software now. You can do things like you can obviously record. You can stream to Twitch. You can overlay a webcam on top of a video feed. So you can kind of do if you want to do a very simple 2-shot stream, which is you over gameplay, you don't need XSplit, you don't need OBS, you don't need anything like that. You can just use this included application to do it. So, right there we had capture from an Xbox One X and then a webcam hooked up locally to PC. And the captures look good. The default encoding, it uses GPU encoding to get to the higher frame rates. The playback looks like butt on the stream.
Yeah.
Thanks, YouTube. But in this case, we're using NVENC with a GTX 1070, I think, to do the hardware HEVC, H.265 encoding.
How much overhead does that add?
Virtually none.
If you're watching the video stream, there's some stuttering in this playback.
But go watch the YouTube video on the actual YouTube page, and it's good. And if you have a client that supports HDR, you can actually view the HDR capture.
But there was an issue with that.
Yeah, we ran into a bit of an issue. It's actually an NVENC issue because I was emailing AVerMedia back and forth on this, where the outputted file would be 3840 by 2176, so it wouldn't actually conform to 3840 by 2160, 4K UHD resolution. So if you just uploaded it straight to YouTube, it would never process 4K. It would only top out at 1080p, and it would never actually load the HDR metadata. Now, it could have just been our specific test configuration, some weird incompatibility, because, AVerMedia has had this work. You should just be able to directly dump your files to YouTube and get processed as HDR. What I had to do is I had to import it into Premiere, sort of scale the image up. It was actually capturing the correct amount of pixels. You just kind of had to, back in the day, if you use VDub with a direct stream copy to just kind of change an aspect of the metadata, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, you're literally getting rid of one scan line.
Yeah.
Because each one of those in MPEG-4 is 16 lines.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's just a weird bug that's been actually well documented on the NVIDIA forums with this specific encoder. But
and from what I read, NVIDIA doesn't look like they're interested in fixing it. I saw one comment.
It's been a thing for a while.
They were like, look, this is still within the spec, and if there's a player that can't play it, that's the player's fault.
Yeah. But I mean, once we got that figured out, we got into Premiere, I could export it with saving all the HDR10 metadata and then upload it to YouTube fine. The best part about this is the USB adapter is $250. Oh, and actually, I forgot to mention one of the cool things about the Live Gamer Ultra, the USB one. It uses UVC, so the driverless emulating a webcam standard. So you can just plug it in, and any app that has webcam support will be able to see it.
Nice.
Or you can still use the AVerMedia software if you want the additional control. You want just like a nice recording app to use. You want to be able to change some stuff. So you actually have that flexibility, but you don't need to install any drivers to use it, which is always a really good thing for video capture hardware. But $250, it's a little pricier than a lot of those boxes, but it's the only external box I've seen that can pass through HDR. So if you have an HDR display, you're going to want something like this. But for $50 more, if you have the PCIe slot, you can step up to the Live Gamer 4K and get 4K 60 capture plus HDR, and it's a really compelling product. I know we looked at the Elgato 4K capture card probably about a year ago, and that was 4K 60 but no HDR.
Yeah,
for I think $300. Mm-hmm. Now they did add HDR pass-through to that card through a firmware update, but it still doesn't record HDR. So yeah, I mean, AVerMedia has a leg up here.
Question from the chat is it Mac compatible? I imagine referring to the external one.
I believe there's a Rec Central for Mac, so probably.
Okay.
I haven't tested it.
All right. So $299 for the PCIe version with 4K 60 HDR, $250 for the USB version with just 4K 30.
Yeah. It's amazing how far capture devices have come since we built all of this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for that, Ken.
Oh, well, Ken, we have all this stuff here. Do you remember how much those Blackmagic capture cards ran when you first got them?
And how bad they were?
How bad they were.
How poorly they performed.
Kept overheating.
Yeah. They still do.
Yeah.
Isn't there a fan and a duct inside that box?
Yes.
Case fan.
This machine has about a foot-long piece of cardboard and a ducted fan over the capture card because if it gets above, 76 degrees ambient in here, it starts dropping inputs.
Yeah. They just go away.
Awesome.
Until you bounce the box.
Their support told us the thermal throttle was like 80 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it was 84. What? Or like 84C? No, 84F.
What?
What kind of chip has that kind of a problem?
Apparently it doesn't like room temperature.
They're ASICs.
Yeah. Need that ice cube cooling, right, Sebastian?
All right.
No comment.
Next up, we got another review from Chris Koch. We've got two SteelSeries gaming mice, the Rival 650, which is a wireless mouse, and the Rival 710, which is a wired version. Surprisingly, as he mentions in the review, and as I was reading this over, you'd think the 710 would be better than the 650, and they do have unique feature sets, but he says basically the 650's got the more compelling features. First of all, it does have the RGB, so that's the 3 in a row for the RGB. Got the RGB hat
Truly
trick.
Compelling.
Yeah.
Truly.
It's got adjustable weight. It comes in at, I think it was 80 grams, and you can add up to 32 more with adjustable weights. Just to give you that right feel, it's got buttons for various mapping, and they also use a haptic feedback feature, which seemed kind of neat, where you program a button click, so like one of your dedicated buttons, and then it starts a countdown timer, and that you can configure. And then when that timer's up, it vibrates. And so if you're playing like a MOBA or strategy games where you've got cooldowns, right?
Quake item response.
Or anything where there's going to be a time limit that you're going to be aware of, you can configure it to trigger a button, or configure it so that when you trigger a button, it gets that timer, and you don't have to look down at the mouse to know that your whatever it is ready. But it is limited to one button and just a time-based haptic feedback, so you can't tie it to in-game events and things like that. But overall, very good review from Chris on the Steelseries. The 650, the wireless version, is $120. The Rival 710 is $100. And there's custom software too that comes with it that he says is very easy to use, allows you to program the lighting effects. On the 710, there's a little screen that gives you.
This is one.
Yeah, you can put a custom display on there, and you can put like an animated GIF, or you can tie it to compatible games where it will show you your life bar, your ammo counter. Seems neat. In from my perspective, I'm thinking, why would you be looking down at your mouse to see what your ammo level is, your health level? So, and he mentions that too. It's like it's neat. It's an interesting concept. Potential usability is questionable, but something there to play with. It's just that it's a very low resolution, and you have to stretch it out, and then it displays at the right aspect ratio on the device. So interesting set of mice. He still says, Logitech has probably got a lock on this market in terms of like the best price to performance for the gaming mice series. But he says if you're a SteelSeries fan, or you just want something different from a Logitech product or somebody else, it's a good one to check out. So that's the Rival 650 and the Rival 710 SteelSeries gaming mice. And we've got another review from Sebastian. It's a case review, which is just his bread and butter.
For a minute, I thought you said we've got another Patreon sponsor that I'm going to read out loud.
We don't have that set, or we've just switched that over. And I left my phone over there.
Mr. Smoky Treats just gave $3 a month.
I don't know if I have the PC Per one set up on this.
To the Patreon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Smoky Treats.
Is that your cat?
No, my cat. Oh, she left. Never mind.
She has good taste.
No. Yeah, she's smart.
Oh.
But Sebastian, why don't you tell us about this BitFenix Nova tempered glass case?
Okay, first thing about the case is it's very affordable as cases go these days. This is MSRP of $56.99.
Wait.
Yes, Josh.
Wait.
It does.
Cup holder compatible.
It's got an optical drive area.
Josh, you're stealing my thunder, but you're absolutely right.
Oh, it's beautiful.
What the case review kind of became was like, this is kind of like an old retro style case inside of a new case shell. So you've got some pretty modern looking styling, and it's got, of course, the tempered glass side panel. This is the Nova TG, and the TG, Josh, the TG stands for tempered glass.
I thought it stood for...
Oh, no.
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 Nope.
Gargantuan.
But yes, it has an external 5.25-inch bay. But what's interesting is when you open it up, there's actually 3 bays in there. You only have access to 1. So I guess
that's ripping the customer off.
Dremel.
They need to have access to all 3 bays.
Solves all.
When you have access to all 3 bays, you just don't have external access to all 3 bays.
You're going to have to pick a top bay and a bottom bay. And
I mean, I'm fine with it. Think about it. I can put both of my Bigfoot drives in there and have a 5.25-inch optical
Me and my 5.25-inch hard drives.
Because when I'm listening to optical media, I want 2 Bigfoots on
you want as much
side
vibration as possible.
Exactly. But looking at the interior pictures of this case, you can tell like this is a little bit of a retro design, to say the least. And if you look at the back, those are in fact below that 120 millimeter fan. Those are punch outs.
Oh wow!
They're not expansion slot covers.
Whoa!
When you punch them out, they're gone forever, and it does not come with any. That was my biggest gripe with the case.
Well, to be honest, as soon as we punch any of them out, be they replaceable or not, they're gone forever.
I don't think I've seen that on a case in 15 years. I mean, are there any other? I've seen a few years and years ago that used that style, but are there any other cases shipping?
It's a $50 case.
Tons.
Tons.
There's so many inexpensive
cases.
Yeah,
that's true.
In the 50 or so cases I reviewed in the last 3.5 or 4 years, I have only seen it on like 2, and they were definitely in this like $50.
Did they just find tooling and then slap a tempered side panel on it, like tooling they already had for a case from the 90s?
I'm thinking the tooling. Now, the one thing that kind of I was thinking that it was an older interior shell, but the cages are at least new. Like the drive cages, you wouldn't have seen the drive cages with those slide-in plastic trays that are toolless, 15 years ago. So that's a little bit of an upgrade.
Was that Antec who started that with the whole toolless installs for drives?
I think so. Antec was one of them.
DXT had it pretty early too, but it wasn't a great implementation.
You remember the Antec drive bays that you would like essentially suspended in elastic? Yep, those were stupid.
But no vibration.
Yeah.
One other thing, speaking of hard drives, it has the room for it, but for some reason the cage for the SSDs is almost as big as the one for the hard drives. So you only have space for 3 hard drives. It would have been nice to see like that 4th hard drive and maybe only have a couple of SSD slots, because you can always put them behind the motherboard, especially because this design, the rear panel, cover panel, is bowed out significantly by design. It's got a bowed out section almost as big as the side panel. So there's tons of room for cable mess. There was almost no additional cabling in my build behind the motherboard tray, but even if you're not careful, like this back cover goes on without any problems. So build process.
Believe you me, I'm not very careful. I'll stick a 2-week-old ham sandwich behind my case just because dampens the noise.
Yeah, but wouldn't it smell bad with the heat back there? I mean, you've got to weigh every option, Josh. I mean, yes,
you know what?
It's an easy sandwich repository.
I've got 2 teenage boys, and I swear that they have bought stock in Old Spice body spray. And so having a little earthy ham sandwich rotting in the back of your computers is
it's a bit of a relief, isn't it?
It is. It's a wonderful thing.
It's edgy, Josh.
But temps and noise acceptable?
Surprisingly good considering you've got a solid front panel. I mean, it is vented on the sides and the bottom, let's see here. What were the actual numbers? The numbers were kind of towards the bottom, but they're not outrageous. I mean, you're talking about within a couple of degrees, within 2 to 3 degrees of the Be Quiet Silent Base 601, which was another case with like the solid front panel and the same kind of venting. So this one did not come with the same level of like front intake as the Be Quiet. So you could get it a little bit higher airflow, but it's fine. There was no significant thermal issues, and it actually was not bad as far as noise goes, which is nice when you consider this has that tempered glass side panel. And there's no insulation on this thing at all. And the metal is fairly thin. It's not so thin that you can, take the case out of square in your bare hands. It does feel quite solid, but it's a very lightweight case. And I was not expecting noise levels to be anywhere near that Be Quiet case. So overall, because of that and because of the fact that you can actually use an optical drive if you still want to use one of those, and it's got room for the stuff you've already got. That was my takeaway. And it's only $55. Like right now it's on Amazon for about $54. It's dropped a couple dollars. So definitely in that price range, I thought it was deserving of a PC Perspective Gold Award.
All right. Well,
do you have to send this case back?
Unknown. They have not contacted me about a return yet. But you know what? The case review.
They're looking at the shipping and saying, keep it.
Yeah, no.
All right. Well, so a great case for optical drive lovers and budget builders. All right. So thanks for that, Sebastian.
You guys seem so festive there. I mean, I'm looking at the...
Well, Ken's been dropping glitter on me every time the camera cuts away.
Yeah, I noticed there was some stuff on your head there, Jim.
Yeah, that's okay. I deserve it. All right, well, let's do the news.
You have an ad.
Oh, but wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So we're gonna take a moment here to thank our sponsor, and we'll be right back.
Party poppers.
This episode of the PC Perspective podcast is brought to you by Casper. Casper is a sleep brand that continues to revolutionize its line of products to create an exceptionally comfortable sleep experience one night at a time. Casper's mattresses are designed by humans for humans. The original Casper mattress combines multiple supportive memory foams for a quality sleep surface with just the right sink and just the right bounce. Casper's breathable design helps you sleep cool and regulate your body temperature throughout the night. And they're not just a mattress company. Casper offers a wide array of products to ensure an overall better sleep experience, and Casper's mattresses are made in the USA. Buying a Casper mattress is easy too. Just order online, and in a few days, your mattress will be delivered to your door in a compact box. Move the box into your bedroom, open it up, and your mattress will expand out to its full size, ready for you to enjoy a great night's sleep. Plus, there's free shipping and free returns in the US and Canada. But best of all is Casper's risk-free 100-day trial. We spend 1/3 of our lives on a mattress, so it's important to truly sleep on a mattress before committing. That's why Casper gives you 100 nights to try it out and see if it's the mattress for you. And if it's not, just let them know, and they'll return it for you for a full refund. But I don't think you're really going to need the full 100 days to experience the benefits of Casper. My family has been sleeping on Casper mattresses for over 3 years. After getting married, my wife and I went through several mattresses, but we just couldn't find one that was right for both of us. But then, one night, long before I joined the crew here, I was listening to the PC Perspective podcast, and I heard about some company that was selling mattresses online. That's different, I thought. But with a 100-night risk-free trial, I said, well, let's give it a shot. A few days later, a box about the size of a mini fridge showed up at our door. And although I couldn't believe a king-size mattress could actually fit in there, we got the box into our bedroom, opened it up, and watched in amazement as this giant mattress expanded right in front of us. My wife and I were still kind of on the fence about this whole thing, but once we got in bed that first night, we immediately knew this mattress was the one. Since that day, we both sleep better, and for me personally, the Casper mattress's supportive memory foam has eliminated the back pain I regularly woke up with on our old mattresses. We love our Casper so much that when our son graduated from a crib to a bed, we got another Casper for him, and then just last year, we upgraded our guest room bed to a Casper too. We couldn't be happier with our Casper mattresses, and we have a deal to help you try one out for yourself. Podcast listeners can get $50 towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/PCPer and using code PCPer at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. That's $50 towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/PCPer using code PCPer at checkout. We thank Casper for their continued support of the PC Perspective podcast. And we're back. Thanks so much to Casper for their support of the show. And we'll jump right into the news. So a couple processor stories this week. We got some news from Intel on their
Clap.
Yeah. Okay.
How did I not pick that up yet?
Yeah. So the Xeon Cascade Lake Advanced Performance Platform not glued together, right?
No. Here's the theme for this week. Can I interest you in some chiplets?
It burns like glue. No?
Go ahead, Ken.
I'm just generally not sure how to go on. So this is kind of ahead of the supercomputing conference next week. Intel unveiled the new Cascade Lake Advanced Performance. So this is a new tier of Xeon. They're using a multi-chip package to hit 48 cores in a single processor. These are targeted at 2-socket systems, so we're talking 96 cores per server, hyper-threaded. So a many core design. So as we've alluded to, Intel's they made a lot of stink about EPYC being glued together. So now going to a multi-chip package. Definitely during the press briefing, they were getting some questions.
There's glitter in my eye.
That's not glitter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Intel's response to their glued comments is that they weren't inherently saying that multi-die, multi-chip designs were bad. They're saying that the way they were being implemented resulted in performance inconsistencies, and that Cascade Lake AP improves upon this by using Intel's UPI, which is a successor to QPI, which they traditionally use for multi-CPU communication in a multi-socket system. They're using UPI for both chip-to-chip within a single package as well as the 2 sockets. So it's kind of a known interface that performs well, that doesn't have some of the same downfalls as Infinity Fabric.
In theory.
Yeah, in theory. I mean, that's kind of all the detail they gave about it. They gave some numbers comparing it to EPYC in LinPack and one other benchmark, but
Stream Triad.
yeah, kind of take it with a grain of salt until we see some actual independent performance numbers from this stuff. But it's certainly an answer to the 32-core and, as we'll talk about, the 64-core EPYC that was announced earlier this week.
Josh, you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I'm thinking you'd think that they'd have QPI and then move up one other letter and have RPI, but then the basketball people would be really pissed off.
It's true.
Yeah. I'm not saying that large monolithic dies are dead, but if they want to keep margins up there with the kind of competition that we're going to be seeing in the next year, large monolithic dies are going to be hard to sell at the price points that people want to see margins at, especially namely at Intel. And so going with a multi-chip module is it's pretty obvious because Intel has had issues with their 10 nanometer process. I mean, they've kind of had to switch around things with their 14 nanometer plus and plus to make things go faster, but they're sacrificing some density as well. And everything really is a trade-off. I mean, if you want more performance, you want more cores, you're going to have to make trade-offs in your design with the tools that we currently have. And that's namely process technology. And it has slowed down. Moore's Law it's not quite dead, but it's kind of dead. I mean, we're still getting some density gains, but in terms of actual process, transistor switching performance, we've kind of come to a standstill. I mean, 28 nanometer stuff, 32 nanometer stuff, we were hitting around the 3.5 to 4 gigs space. 22 FinFET, it kind of went up in the base clock, but how far you could push it actually went down. And the same thing with 14 nanometer, and now we're looking at 7 and 10 nanometer stuff from these guys, and they've got to rethink how they're actually going to do this. And it seems like smaller chips in multi-chip packages will allow them to continue to increase performance, especially how many threads that they are throwing at any kind of problem, while not going past 400 watts TDP. Now, I think this is this one that they're talking about. Is this the 350 watt TDP?
I don't think
part?
We have a number on that.
Someone was quoting that this 48 core part was possibly a 350 watt TDP,
and it looks like it might not actually have hyperthreading
enabled.
Yeah. There's really not a whole lot of detail on this. I mean, they just kind of announced
it's unfortunate.
They're going to talk more about Cascade Lake and Cascade Lake AP at Supercomputing next week, so there should be a lot more details about this.
Wasn't there a?
But it's almost like they wanted to get out before a certain announcement this week.
Yeah,
yeah. Shock and awe.
So, Josh, you touched on the lack of hyperthreading or possible lack of hyperthreading. Now,
Ken did, but I'll go ahead and work on it.
So now we're moving into these multi-chip modules, and we're spreading things out. And how many exploits are we up to now regarding hyper-threading? They got 3 big ones, I think?
4 with port smash.
I mean, there's the speculative execution and speculative reads, and hyper-threading not so much. It's more to do with cache lines being accessed by a non-secure thread that you can do it speculatively, but you can't do it when you actually need to actually access the data. And so that's kind of the whole Spectre thing.
No, I'm not talking about the Warhammer derivatives.
Has lower privileges than actually accessing data, and so that's how they got around a lot of that stuff. But in terms of hyper-threading, it's not as big of a security risk. It's just all that is throwing data at the execution units that are out of sync with another thread.
Yeah,
And
I'm talking about the
utilizing
OpenBSD stuff.
more of those. But they can't read that data when it's in the pipeline versus when they're doing speculative lookups in cache where they can. So yeah, hyperthreading, not as big of a security threat. I think what hyperthreading does more than anything is you're pushing up the TDPs because you're utilizing more of those parts, more of the CPU at a higher level than you would if it was just a single thread instead of hyperthreading. And so they're looking at so dense chips that if you enable hyperthreading, I mean, your TDP is just going to go through the roof because they're just being used so much. And you kind of look at what ARM is doing. I mean, they're not even looking at hyperthreading. They're looking at wider cores. They have 4 bigs, 4 smalls, and we can handle 8 threads. And if the OS is really, really efficient, it can do a lot of the background stuff on these low power cores, while the high performance stuff needs to be using these big cores. And Intel is not really at that point with their monolithic cores. So it's an interesting balance. And disabling hyperthreading, you are in theory, if you've got a 48 wide chip and you can hyperthread that. Okay, and again, this is theory. That's not actually talking about a product. But if you've got a server and you've got 48 threads available to it, would it really be a good idea to jump that up to 84 in many workloads? Because you've still got memory issues, you've got I/O issues. How much is too much? And I think this is the point where Intel is kind of looking at it and saying, okay, where's our workload? Where's our TDPs? How complex do we need to make things? And it's a big question because we're not going any faster in terms of clock speed, but we are going really wide and we're starting to eat a lot of power. So
yeah,
what do you do from here?
So I mean, actually, the chat is kind of pointing this out, and this is an interesting thing.
No Alexa.
No Alexa. I'm waiting for that light to go off.
Would you like to chat with an Alexa? Bad Alexa, down.
No. Anyways, what I was going to say is this is essentially taking their 4-socket design and shrinking it to a smaller form factor. They're using the same link to connect the 2 chips on one substrate. They have 12-channel memory. Like it's essentially a 4-socket system that will be in a smaller 2-socket form factor, which actually, I mean, has its benefits, but it's not anything groundbreaking. Like you'll be able to achieve probably greater density in a data center, but it's not going to be some weird new level performance we've never seen before. So that's that to think about.
Well, we'll have more to talk about on that shortly, I'm sure. And we probably should have rearranged these so that the Zen one was right after. But yeah, okay, we'll get to that in a moment.
No, let's not, because I need a break.
Okay. Well, while Josh takes a break, let's talk about another problem here, which is a pretty serious issue with SSD firmware encryption. Why don't you tell us about this, Jeremy?
Yeah, so that handy little baked-in firmware encryption that you're buying in your SSDs actually exists completely and solely on that SSD and doesn't actually take your own user password or the password that you set up with, say, BitLocker and incorporate it into the encryption. That means every single thing on that disk, and there's quite a few of them, especially Crucial and Samsung, it's a single key. And so if you pop that drive out, plug into the debug ports, you can very quickly convince it to just accept anything as a valid unencrypting code and unencrypt your stuff. This is
Seems
utterly
smart.
and completely brilliant.
Yeah.
So there were several methods there. So Jeremy's talking about the JTAG thing.
Yeah.
But going through the paper, there's a lot of enlightening little tidbits in there. They were using JTAG just to like sort of probe and find other exploits, but some of these exploits where you don't even need internal access to the SSD.
Are you talking about the one where it seeds a value on a register at first boot, but the register wasn't readable at first boot, so it sets it to null and then hashes it?
Yeah. So there was something like that. There were other ones. There were other ones where it's like, okay, well, this one drive has a vendor-specific command that's undocumented, but we figured it out because we, dumped the drive's firmware. And like, so if you issue this very unique command with this unique, basically you just try to read from a sector that's not on a disk. Like that's one example of it, right? But you send it a command that is non-standard, and it just opens up another set of commands, and one of them might just be to dump the entire cryptographic table of the drive. Yeah. Just like here's all the keys, basically. Things like that, right? So if it's a matter of a combination of not being completely secure with security through obscurity, right? Like just trying to do those things, and nobody will ever figure this out.
And BitLocker also lying to you, because unless you specifically go deep into the settings to turn on software encryption, it claims it's software encrypted, but it's not actually. It's just going off of the hardware.
Right, and that's the other problem is Microsoft's implementation of, if you're using BitLocker on drives, right, and it sees that the drive supports Opal, then, fine, that drive supports Opal. I'll just totally entrust in that drive's ability to be secure, which honestly...
It should do.
It should be able to.
I understand the assumption, but...
and that does... And in its defense, the whole point of that is so that, especially if you're on a mobile system, for many cases, SSDs will pass all incoming and outgoing data through some form of crypto engine anyway, whether or not you have a password set. Just usually it has its own, preset key or whatever. But the engine is usually there. It's in hardware. It's basically zero overhead. And you wouldn't want, if that was there and it was secure, then you wouldn't necessarily want BitLocker to start using this, CPU heavy crypto and try to pass all disk I/O through the CPU, because even in accelerated form, that is more power consumption, just more overhead on the host.
But I would argue the other way. Having the encryption hardware and the encryption keys bound physically to the device is just right off the crank seems bad.
I agree with you. But there are secure ways to do it.
The thing here is that Opal shouldn't just be a set of specifications from the trusted computing group. It should be a certification process.
Yeah.
Right. Where someone is actually looking at this firmware.
Yes.
Or maybe they have a open source Opal implementation that people can vet. That is an example implementation that then people like Crucial and Samsung and Intel and everybody can go implement.
Yeah.
Instead of just being a black box that nobody apparently ever checks up on.
Now, I know they only mentioned Crucial and Samsung here. I'd venture a guess that probably other companies are vulnerable. They might have either other companies were much harder to crack and they just kind of gave up, or they only got this far and were just like, holy crap, look at all the nuggets of information we have here. This is probably enough for a paper as it is, because that paper is pretty lengthy and goes into a bunch of different methods that, bunch of different vulnerabilities. And there were plenty of forks in the road as you're walking through that paper where they were just like, this could also be possible, but we just didn't, that was just too exhaustive for this paper. But there were just plenty of other avenues where it could have been even worse. We just don't know because they didn't go down that road. But presumably, based on what you see and how vulnerable some of these things are and how easily they were vulnerable, those other avenues they didn't pursue would probably also be fruitful, is just my guess.
Yeah.
But Ken's totally right. You really need a certification with source code review and firmware review for it to be completely trusted. For any kind of a, security thing. The most troubling of those in that list is the T3 and the T5 from Samsung, which are just external drives, because that's the thing where you really are worried about, it's way more likely people will have encryption enabled on those devices.
And there's that T3 and T5.
Left it on the train. Oh boy. So, obviously this is disaster for enterprise, large customers. A lot of that for our home
who
users.
either trusted simply the encryption on the drive or trusted BitLocker.
Yeah,
right.
If you go for software encryption, or you tweak BitLocker to specifically avoid detecting firmware encryption acceleration on a drive, you're good.
You're good. Okay. Because I know
or you can put it on top of it so that you can encrypt it via the firmware and put a software layer on top of it.
Okay.
Which
BitLocker,
is a bad idea.
BitLocker really should just have like some sort of a trust no one option.
Yes, it should.
Where it just, don't pay any attention to Opal. Right. And Jeremy's talking about a tweak. I don't know. I didn't even know there was a tweak, but presumably there's probably some.
If you screw around in PowerShell, we figured it out.
No, okay.
Hopefully
we decided to just disable BitLocker because it's annoying.
Hopefully you can apply it over group policy because there's going to be a lot of machines deployed that need that change now.
Yep.
All right. So
and BitLocker on encryption always goes well.
So there are options to mitigate the damage or protect yourself until something can be figured out here.
Trust no one.
Of course.
Yep.
Next up, we got some new compute cards from AMD. They're pretty interesting looking. The AMD Radeon Instinct, is it pronounced MI60 or is it
MI?
Yeah. Okay. So the MI60 and the MI50 accelerator cards. These are 7 nanometer Vega based cards that Josh alluded to a couple weeks ago on the show. That these are some of the 7 nanometer Vega parts heading into enterprise and high end workstations. So what do you got for us here on this one, Jeremy?
Well, according to AMD's specs and the tests that they got someone to do, that MI60 is currently the fastest PCIe HPC card on the planet.
Edging out the Tesla V100?
That's what they claimed that it was slightly faster than. They're claiming 7.4 teraflops at FP64, and the Tesla V100 does 7 even. Take this with a grain of salt, of course, because no one's actually got them hands on these cards to test. But it will be interesting to see because regardless, it is an impressive amount of double precision performance. It also introduces PCI Express 4.0, which, before you get really excited, is not going to help you in your gaming because that's not really the bottleneck. But if you're into deep learning and development and stuff, this is actually pretty huge. And it's part of how it's not only able to do this, but they can set it up into fancy little hives. So the idea with this is that because they're utilizing AMD's new Infinity Fabric to link the GPUs, and as you see in the picture there's 4 of them all squished together, you can actually set up 2 hives, each having 8 GPU servers in them. With the help of their new ROCm 2.0 software, which other people than I know a bit more about. But it's just a huge jump compared to what AMD has previously offered on their sort of high-end deep learning and just productivity cards. So it's going to be really interesting to see what benchmarks look like the beginning of next year when they're starting to expect to arrive on scene.
AMD's big. One of the big things they've always had in their favor compared to Intel and NVIDIA is price advantage. Do we have any information on how these will compare price-wise to NVIDIA's options?
I did not see anything. I don't know if there were rumors. I didn't spot any.
Okay.
These are the type of products you don't generally get pricing for.
Yeah.
But
because if you have to ask what the price is, you can't afford it.
Josh, I know you were watching the keynote
I sure was
yesterday. I couldn't quite catch it. They mentioned Infinity Link in the context of EPYC. So can you use Infinity Fabric? Infinity Fabric instead of PCI Express on an EPYC platform?
Okay, we don't know a whole lot of the details here. Infinity Fabric, I think, is not PCI Express, but it's kind of similar. Mm-hmm. So if you look at like the ARM C6, CCIX, that's based on PCI Express, except that they use different protocols on top of that to do things like coherency in terms of cache and just kind of improve communication, not just using a regular PCIe, link. It's protocol over PCIe, but it's not PCIe. So do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Infinity Fabric is different though. It's not PCIe based. And it's, as far as I know, it's not hypertransport based either, because there were some inefficiencies and bad things with hypertransport as well. But I think this is based on the C micro stuff. But Infinity Fabric has been designed in not just Zen, but in the original Vega parts. But it was not really fully utilized in Vega, except, of course, with the Zen 2000 series APUs.
Yeah.
So that actually Vega's had Infinity Fabric for, when it was designed from the ground up. And so we're now seeing this. Now, in theory, you can attach to a substrate a bunch of Zen cores and then have a Vega stuck in there, and it can all communicate through Infinity Fabric. It's obviously not as easy as, plug it in Legos, but it's the same thing. It's you're using that same kind of protocol to communicate in between chips at a high bandwidth, low latency type interconnect. And so, in theory, you could have a substrate where you have a couple of Zen 2 cores and then the IO core and then some Vega chips in there, and you can have this really high teraflop chip that's socketed. Whether or not they do that, I don't know. But the new Instincts and the Vega 7 nanometers it's a big jump from their previous products because they're doubling the HBM2 bandwidth. They've also got double the amount of HBM2. And it's a significant redesign, but not without redesigning the entire house. It's just they used a lot of the basics, they've added to it, and it's a better part. But I think the biggest problem that AMD has is software and developer input, because NVIDIA has an amazing DevRel group, and especially with CUDA and universities and teaching the people who are going into the workforce how to use CUDA in their university and in their classrooms. And that translates to the next generation of workers going into companies saying, hey, we can get better efficiency. We can really hammer on performance. We can do things that our competitors are not, because I have these basic skill sets that I learned in college based on CUDA, and that's going to translate into actual money for the company that I'm working for. And that's what AMD is fighting against. And it's a big uphill battle, because NVIDIA was really, really quite clever in how they introduced CUDA, and especially into the universities, and gave them a lot of money, because universities like money.
Yeah. No, they have been making some
inroads.
There you go. English.
There you have it.
And as Jeremy alluded to, they announced ROCm 2.0. ROCm being their CUDA equivalent, essentially their sort of GPU acceleration SDK. And they announced it's going to be mainstreamed to the Linux kernel, which is big. Because right now, setting up ROCm, it's not difficult, but it's not great. It's another step you have to do. So if you just have an AMD GPU plugged in and start running code on it, be a pretty good step.
But they also were working with like TensorFlow and Google. That's
been
big.
Messing a little around with the TensorFlow. They have an upstreamed port that is essentially OpenCL for TensorFlow, which is huge. That didn't exist 6 months ago, really. So
no,
times are changing,
and for a good thing, because we need more competition in this marketplace.
Oh yeah.
Well, staying on the AMD and competition theme, AMD.
What if I don't want to stay on the AMD theme? Well,
we're there. They had a big event this week. Yesterday, was it? I'm losing track of time. they had a big event where they talked about their new EPYC Rome series processors. We've got Josh, you covered that for us, but we don't have anything written.
Yeah, Tim
right?
actually posted something. It's in the show notes. He just posted it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
sorry. One
but
second.
I think both Josh and I were kind of keeping up with this event yesterday as we were going on.
Yeah, we're live tweeting it.
Yeah,
which is not nearly as good as actually writing a stinking article.
Well,
seems to be what people are saying anyway.
Well,
look at that
thanks,
beautiful CPU. Look
Yeah.
at it. That's awesome.
That's 128 threads, 64 cores.
It's crazy.
Each of those little chiplets is 2 CCXs
Wow.
of Zen 2 technology.
It's almost like they doubled, how many they can fit within a given amount of space.
Yes, the 7 nanometer process is kind of impressive in terms of density, but we don't know enough about this yet to kind of start guessing about what they've actually included in these Zen 2 cores. So
Yeah,
that
because the
big
transistor count was all
thing
right.
in the middle is the DDR4 controllers, a lot of PCI Express, and Infinity Fabric. So if you think of each of those individual cores being able to communicate not with just themselves, but with that middle chip, I mean, the amount of pads that substrate has is going to be really, really stinking impressive. And we don't know how many PCI Express lanes are coming off of this. We do know it's 8 memory controllers, and so that's a lot of pins and pads as well. It's just it's kind of an impressive product, and that thing is that in the middle part, it's a 14 nanometer IO, and so not only does it have PCIe and memory controllers and Infinity Fabric, but I'm kind of wondering if it doesn't have some L4 cache, a large amount of L4 cache embedded in that, because each of those 8 stinking CPU cores with 2 CCXs apiece, there's going to be a lot of memory access. And if you throw a big chunk of L4 in there, it's going to solve a lot of bandwidth and latency problems right off the bat.
Yeah.
So until we find out more about this, there's a lot that we could talk about.
I mean, it's a big physical chip, right?
Yeah, it's as big as the current Threadripper. I mean, which, as you know, is massive.
And what takes up a lot of area? Cache.
It's true.
Yes, it does. And so I mean, this has 256 megs of L3 cache that we know of.
Wow.
And they're not even telling us if there's any L4 in there. And if I'm a betting man, and I'm not particularly, but I think that there is going to be L4 in there just because that's going to improve efficiency. Going to an L4 cache, even though it is not as efficient as going to L3, when you start doing, talking about snooping and cache coherency and main memory accesses, you're going to gain a lot of performance if you got L4 in that big old chip in the middle. And if you think of how much space memory controllers and PCIe controllers and that stuff takes, it's not very much. So why is that chip so big?
Yeah. It seems like just a really good use of resources, right? So they're pushing the 7 nanometer node, TSMC 7 nanometer node on the CPU cores, on the part they need to, and then relying on more tried and true 14 nanometer wafers they can get much cheaper at this point for the less important, less critical stuff that wouldn't really see an advantage being on a 7 nanometer node.
This is correct. And I mean, each of those Zen 2 cores is tiny. I mean, it's like 73 to 75 millimeters square.
Wow.
Which that's less than half of what, a 14 nanometer or 12 nanometer Zen Plus, or whatever you want to call it, core is. We do have other questions. Are these the chips that you're going to see in desktop Zen 2 processors? I don't think so. I think that they probably stripped a lot of that stuff out, a lot of the I/O, memory controllers, things like that, and have dedicated probably just the Infinity Fabric PCIe lanes.
Yeah.
and that's it. I mean, it's very, very focused. So I because they're releasing these relatively quickly. I mean, like the first of the year, but we're not going to see desktop Zen 2 parts until
Q3
end of first
maybe.
half 2019. Yeah. So I'm wondering if there are not, in fact, two totally different chips, one with more IO capabilities that, you know, reflects back on the original Zen, which has SATA controllers and memory controllers and all that. I mean, why, if you're really pushing into the EPYC world, why would you want to include on that on every die all that functionality, which you're not going to use because you've got this big IO chip in the middle that's handling all that?
Yeah. So they did earlier in the day, they showed, I mean, it was more of an artistic thing, right? Where they had the two sort of CPU core chips and then the IO control in the middle. So I can maybe see that being more of a consumer configuration where you have, I guess, 4 CCXs total.
It makes sense. I mean, if they're going to go through all this work to go through and re-engineer and re-architect this whole system from the existing Zen architecture, which pretty much was the same kit, just you pile more of them on there. I mean, it works. It works fine. So they go through all this and they move to this chiplet architecture. They already have existing 14 nanometer stuff that works fine. The cache coherency, all that stuff's pretty well proven out. And they move to a chiplet design and they lead with the EPYC, the Rome. But if they already invest all this time into it, why not have a single chiplet or 2 chiplet variant with a reduced IO controller, but keep the same architecture? Have that scalability from the low end single chiplet all the way up to the, I mean, how many are on there? There's 8.
Well, that's supposed to be one of the advantages of the Infinity Fabric in the first place.
Right. Yeah, your mesh, your underlying mesh is there, and that's well proven, and it's seems to be pretty well proven to be scalable. So,
yeah,
why not stick to it?
Well, how many chips do you actually want to design if you're AMD? I mean, obviously, the answer to that is the lowest number possible. So, you do an IO, you do a chiplet, and then you do the desktop, which then you mod into the APU.
Yeah,
versus what you're talking about. So, I mean, where does that balance in design resources that you have as AMD and how much money you can throw at the problem? What is the perfect number of parts for each generation that you can really introduce, at the same time being able to potentially overcome any advantages that Intel will throw at you because they've got better manufacturing in theory, more design capabilities, and they want to use probably bigger monolithic chips because that's kind of Intel. I mean, where's the balance point here? And I think we're going to find that out obviously in the next 8 months. But I just think that AMD is betting a lot of money on being really, really, really competitive in the data center because that's an area that is still going to grow. And it's an area that is worth a lot of money. And if they think that they can get with a more specialized design with this big IO chip in the middle and be able to offer an amazing amount of threads, really good yields. I mean, really good yields because each of those chips is really small. So yields and bins are probably going to be really, really good for those chips versus a one large 700 millimeter square die. And I think that they're going about this in a really clever way. But we're going to have to see if the market reacts to them as well as they're hoping to. I mean, I think they're going to have some success here, and they're leveraging a better process technology than what Intel can do until the end of 2019. So they have a real window of opportunity to do some really neat things, and I think they're going about it in a really clever way. And I think that they're going to make some good money and they're going to make some inroads, but it's going to be that past 2019 area that is going to be the question. I think that Intel is going to take a while to kind of react to what AMD has been showing off. And I don't know. It's a big company. They've got a lot of money. they can if they choose to, they can turn on a dime. I mean, we look at the Pentium 4 to Conroe. I mean, they just said, okay, we're going to, Tejas. Okay, screw Tejas. These Israeli guys have got really something amazing here. We're going there, and
We've been there ever since.
2 years.
Yeah, they have
2 years
been there ever
of
since.
time where they could really, take advantage of what they did in terms of design until Intel struck back with the Core 2.
2019 is going to be a busy year.
It is.
2018 was a busy year.
True.
Well, I can't wait for the ashes of the Singularity benchmark on that chip. All right, last item up, we got a 15, a new benchmark, I guess. This is the biggest consumer drive, Allyn?
It's not a consumer drive.
I mean, it's just the biggest drive you can go buy at a store.
No, that's not true either.
Okay.
You can't even buy it, really, because so this is going to be, it's shingled magnetic recording.
It's SMR, yeah.
And it's an enterprise drive.
But
this is going to be
15 terabytes. Let's get that out.
Yes, 15 terabytes, 7,200 RPM. It's a Ultrastar. It's now Western Digital Ultrastar.
Yeah, that's
transformation
weird.
is complete now. DC HC 620. So they now make that drive in 15 terabytes. There is if you don't want shingled magnetic recording, you have to drop to 12 terabytes.
Yeah.
So it's about like a 25% gain that they get now from going SMR.
Look at the size of that buffer.
Pretty big buffer. Half a gig now.
We're not even to a gig.
Yeah,
Come
I know. So realize you have to, this is a now host managed SMR. So they're just moved away from the drive will try to behave adequately if you gave it just a standard workload and it'll just try to make it SMR. No, now it's just, you have to write to this thing sequentially in a specific way with a specific understanding of, how your application is coded that's doing the writing to these drives. So if you want to do any kind of a random workload or a random write to one of these, it has to be somehow packaged in some form where the drive sees it sequentially, so that it can just continue with the specific shingled write that it's doing.
Is that supported out of the box by the OS, or is that drivers?
No, it's the guys that are using drives like these have coded their own backends that are doing the writing to these drives. Yeah. So they're not even using like RAID specific controllers. They're just using JBOD controllers, just get all the drives connected to the system. The software layer that whoever the company has developed, be it Facebook or, Facebook, Google, whoever, they're going to set something up that's going to handle all of the, redundancy and writing to multiple disks or across multiple arrays or, spaces or whatever. And also they just need to do it in a way that's sequential, so that these drives can behave properly when they're doing the writes. Because as it turns out, you can read from a narrower track than what you can write, which is what gives these drives this advantage. They're just like, well, if we just scoot the head over a half or 3/4 of a track worth, as opposed to going over one full track worth with enough gap between them for a regular, to not overwrite the adjacent tracks, as it turns out, if you just decide to overlap them as you're writing them, when you come back and read, you can still read from the slimmer tracks that you've created with that previous write. So it's just kind of how that stuff works. We're still not to the point. I know it's Jeremy wrote this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it was Tim.
Oh, that was Tim. Yeah. So Tim's longing for the upcoming days of Mammer and Hammer and stuff like that.
Because this has got to be one of the last SMR drives that we're going to be seeing.
So I don't know really how that's going to happen, because even with Mammer, you can still do SMR.
Did you just say ASMR?
No.
Drives?
I did.
I'm going to...
No.
Ken's Josh is going to record. Josh is going to record just hard drive ASMR. It's just the hard drive on a table in front of the microphone, just seeking, right? And then you can do a video for each different hard drive. Actually, I need to go through the old box of hard drives now. We need to do like Velociraptor ASMR.
Let's edit this out of the podcast. So no one steals the idea. This is YouTube gold.
Somebody's going to do it.
We're going to be 100 airs.
But at some point, unpredictable during that recording will be a sudden hammer.
And now I'm going to do a defrag. Listen to this one. Yeah. Yeah, just Velociraptor defrag. It's just like... All right. Anyway, so yeah, when those things come, they're not necessarily gonna just all of a sudden we don't need shingled. You can still stand to get that sort of a benefit from shingled because you'll still be able to read a narrower track than you can write. It's just that with something like MAMR, you'll be able to write to a much narrower track. But some of the hurdles they're dealing with on that, like Western Digital's already doing that. Like they showed it to Ryan and I, a year ago now, flew us out to California and showed us, and they had, not only did they brief us on it, but they had like product actually doing it. It's just that to get the higher densities, now the bottleneck for advancement is sputtering technology of like how they can make the media able to handle writing tracks that much narrower. So you just need to make the domains smaller, the magnetic domains on the media smaller now. So now it's like, oh crap, we solved this one problem. Now we have to spend years developing this, advancing this other part of the technology so that we can actually get the benefits. So expect that to ease in. So it's not like the first MAMR drive you see is going to be one platter 20 terabytes and no need for shingled or anything like that. It's going to still be a progressive thing just based on the media advances.
Sure.
Unfortunately. I'd really like just some breakthrough and just, oh, here's this 50 terabyte, 2.5-inch laptop hard drive.
The world couldn't handle that.
Yeah.
Well, and then your Windows install would go to like 20 terabytes.
Years.
Yeah. And then the Windows installer would immediately be 5 terabytes.
The chat does remind me that you can buy 20 terabyte USB thumbsticks on AliExpress.
Oh, absolutely.
You can. It's like $20.
You can.
Just keep writing, no problem.
Yeah.
Just don't look.
Just don't look. Don't write more than like 4 meg.
Or just don't care about what you write beyond that 4 meg.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the picks of the week. Jeremy's up first with a motherboard for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's that time of the year again where you're sort of trying to figure out cheap gifts for the people that you pretend to care about. And, a BFit 450 board is a great way to set someone up with an upgraded system that they can't break very easily. And the deal that they're having right now, at least on the Canadian version, it's going to be cheaper in America, but $90. And this thing has friggin' everything you're possibly going to want. If you have the money to put an M.2 in there, away you go. It'll support decent DDR4 up to 3200 megahertz. And I mean, it's just got a fair amount of features for what you're going to get, or at least what you should be expecting to get at an $80 price point. It also doesn't look that bad either.
Yeah, it's a nice looking board.
Yeah, it's a nice looking board.
ASRock has done some good things with AM4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Ryzen 2000 series ready, so you don't have to worry about it.
But the only thing that's lacking is like Wi-Fi, and most people would consider that a benefit.
All right. Now, Josh didn't have his pick in, so I've got to bring that up
I
now.
do too.
What you didn't at the beginning when I got my tabs all in a row. All right. What do you got, Josh?
So, higher quality G-Sync monitors are finally getting into price points where people will consider buying. And this, unfortunately, I missed the sale last week. It was like $200 off this $899 price. So it was $699 for a 1440
Ultra
panel, 34-inch wide. It's not HDR, but it's G-Sync, and it's 100 megahertz. No,
120.
100 hertz.
100 megahertz.
Sorry, 100 hertz.
Holy shit.
No, it's 100 hertz. Yeah, I know. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? It's 100 hertz, but you can overclock it to 120 hertz. Some people have had good things with that, not. But it's just a really nice, if you want to replace your 3-monitor system with something that's G-Sync, it's not going to kill you or make your wife kill you, then this is a nice it's a nice product, and I think in the back it's got the LED stuff in the back, so you can program
That's pretty
that.
cool looking.
So if you're in a dark room, you've got the LEDs in the back doing the backlight bias. So, and you can program that to do different, effects and whatnot. So it's a really sharp looking unit.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I mean, it's
also lot of VESA mountable.
Yeah, a lot of gaming products have styling that's a little just too much, and this is aggressive, but kind of classy.
It's classy.
Yeah, look at that.
I like classy.
Nice.
It's got a nice curve to it. $1,800, I think. But yeah, it's one of the shockingly less expensive large G-Sync monitors out there, and it's got plenty of features.
Yeah, $900.
Yep.
Not too bad.
And it is a further advancement over like what was previously like the Acer Predator. I forget which one just the X34 or something. There was an Acer Predator monitor, but it realized those previous ones that are similar to this maxed out at 100 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this one gives you another 20, which is impressive.
And those were $1,200 or more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, technically,
we're getting down there.
This is technically $1,500 MSRP, but
yeah.
So,
but if you catch it, there's more sales coming up, no doubt. I wouldn't be surprised if this monitor dipped back down to that same price.
Yeah. And I've played with one of those Acer ones. It didn't look this good, at least, in my opinion. So
yeah, the Acer design is just really kind of like they do that shiny black stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They like to do that, especially on the back of the Predator.
Yeah.
Like that shows scratches and fingerprints like you wouldn't imagine. So if you have your desk in a setup where you can actually see the back of your monitor, it's like nowhere near as sharp looking as that Alienware.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Ken's got something for us.
Yeah, just a quick one. They announced at BlizzCon last week, I guess it was, that they're as part of the BattleNet Gifts program. Destiny 2 for PC is free through November 18th. Now, it's a convoluted way you have to claim this. You have to go into the BattleNet client and click on the Gifts button, tab, whatever, and accept it. But then you'll own the game in perpetuity. It's the base game and the expansions, but if you want to give it a try, it's a really damn good-looking game that scales really well on all hardware. Like, it scales down well, it scales up well. If you happen to have HDR, it looks amazing, and it's pretty fun, too.
Awesome. And that'll keep people off of or keep their minds distracted from something else that may have been not well received at BlizzCon.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, come on. Warcraft 3 needed a remake.
Yeah, that's true. They should have remade Warcraft 2 first. Come on.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Missed opportunities.
Oh, hang on 1 second. I gotta. No, I already had that one.
Gotta open another link.
Yeah. Okay. So, Allyn.
All right. So I tried this and I thought it was a fail, and then I tried it again, and it wasn't. There's those battery packs you can get, and some of them are claimed to be powerful enough to be able to jumpstart your car, and usually they are not, and they like blow up because you're trying to use just a regular lithium battery and try to jumpstart a car off of it.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? What if you could jumpstart your car just by using the remaining power left in your dead battery? If only you had like some sort of voltage booster,
a capacitor,
and a set of ultra capacitors. And at sort of a reasonable price point, because if you try to, there's people that make ultra capacitor car batteries, but they're like $300 with a capacity to suitable to replace.
What if you got a super cap?
Well, it's a bank of them. It's like 6, I think. I haven't opened up that box.
It's like 6.
So what this is it's a super cap, like a bank.
Super cap.
With this special module that can accept input from either. There's like an adapter with a cigarette lighter plug thing, or it can just use the jumper cable style, like the alligator clips connected to your existing battery. Or there's even, if you're willing to wait like a half an hour, there is a micro USB in. So, and it will accept 5 volts.
Via micro USB.
And I confirmed this, and it charged itself over the course of a half an hour, up all the way from nothing, all the way up to 14.5 volts. With enough power behind it to jumpstart my GTI. The only catch was that my battery was good but dead. So if I tried to connect it to the battery directly, it would immediately start dumping the supercaps into the battery. And by the time I can like run around and get in the car and go to crank it, there was just barely enough to actually turn the thing over more than a couple of revs, right? So then I tried again later, and I just disconnected my battery and I just hooked it right up to the terminals in the car, and jump started the car, no problem. So that might be the only.
How does it work on a Tesla?
It would actually. So here's the thing that's funny. Teslas have a 12-volt battery, and if that battery goes dead, you can't drive the car. It will not fire up, even though even though you're sitting on a huge battery pack. You can't get to it because there's not enough 12-volt power to shut the contactor to connect the big battery to the rest of the car. So this is the kind of thing that would even jumpstart a Tesla. It would
In other news, Allyn will be out tomorrow to take his car to the Tesla dealer for service.
Well, so interesting idea. Just, note to self, like if your battery is dead, you might need to disconnect the battery and just like, so that it doesn't get in the way of you trying to jumpstart off of the supercap bank.
How much interrogation time can you get out of full charge on this?
Interrogation time?
Yeah.
Can you swip those apart so that they're you can actually reach both nipples with the clamps?
It looks like it.
Yes, they split apart.
Oh, good.
Yes,
oh, good.
Yes, they split apart a sufficient distance.
Although I'd like to have a serial and parallel mode switch if I was going to use it for that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, I thought it was interesting that you could, it's a solid idea. You just need something to boost the voltage. And even if you're using the remnant, if your car battery's down to like 5 volts or something, it'll still,
It's all transformation, man.
Yeah, it's just, boost up to a higher voltage with enough oomph behind it to crank the starter a couple times, right? And solid idea. And there's nothing to really degrade here. You don't have to worry about like, because I had a lithium jump start kind of thing in my GTI as like a backup. And I even had brought it back in the house and tried to charge it, and go figure, it's been in the car for like 2 years in the heat and the cold, and that pack is just dead. Doesn't work anymore. There's nothing really to degrade here. So this thing stays dead until you charge it up off of the dead battery. Kind of interesting.
Well, a couple people in the chats said this doesn't look like a good idea. So,
I mean, it works.
We are not endorsing
not the
product.
ozone generator all over again.
but if you're interested, check that out. And Sebastian, you've got a pick for us. Oh, you're muted.
Oh no, he's muted.
He's muted.
Muted.
All right, I'm unmuted now. You can hear my wonderful furnace noises. My pick is for a Sound Blaster product. It is not this Sound Blaster, which is the classic Sound Blaster 16.
Look at that ISA port. Oh.
Wow, and it's got the little adjustment volume knob on it too.
Oh, it does.
Oh, yeah.
It has the volume knob.
Which is
Check it
so
out.
convenient.
Check it out. Look at it.
Game port.
Game port. And this one actually does not suffer from the hanging note bug because it has firmware revision 405.
Ooh.
But actually, it is this Sound Blaster product, which this is not
Upside
a
down.
perfect
It's upside down.
device. It's not a perfect device. Listeners of the podcast don't know that, Allyn, until now. But this interesting thing is a USB device. It's a sound card, but it also has like line level inputs, a phono input.
Huh.
It has a built-in phono preamp. It has optical, digital input and output.
What
It
I
actually
plug
has a
my old
pretty
joystick
decent
into?
headphone amplifier too.
How
We'll
was
drive-
how is the latency? I'm always concerned with latency over those USB connected sound devices because they usually add something over the PCI version.
What I was using this for was basically just capturing from a turntable. I was digitizing some vinyl that's not available digitally. And when I was listening to it in real time as I recorded, there was no perceptible lag.
Okay.
but it's hard to say because I was using this as the phono preamp, and it did a very good job. It's very, very quiet.
Yeah, because you can totally see what the needle is doing in terms of sound and what's hitting your ears.
Well, I mean, there's the whole like the needle drop and like the you hear the noise from the vinyl.
Listen, Josh, Sebastian can hear these things.
He can.
I can hear.
And besides, when it's throbbing bristle, it's kind of hard to hear the latency.
Sebastian doesn't even see the vinyl. He just sees peaks, valleys, stereo.
There is no vinyl.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're immersed in a well set up living room speaker system, then no, the speakers disappear and you're transported into a magical 3-dimensional realm of audio goodness.
Yeah.
But I do not have that. And in fact, I don't even have a turntable set up right now because I have a 3-year-old child who's extremely destructive. So hence the idea, hey, why don't I digitize some of these records I can't listen to any other way? This thing does a good job. It's $100, but if you're using it for PC audio, it will drive any headphones. It supports high resolution
600
audio.
ohms.
Yes, it does support 600 ohms. If you are a Sennheiser fan. Wait, no, I'm thinking of the 600s for like 300 ohms, but anyhow, it has a good reputation for driving headphones. The issue with it, as far as playback is concerned, is even though there are dual oscillators on the board, it only implements the 48 kilohertz oscillator. I don't know why it's even on there. You can see a rant about that at ixbt.com's review of it from like 2014. But everybody who's reviewed it has basically complained about the same thing. You cannot set it to 44.1 in software, 88.2. And if you're into high resolution digital audio, some of the stuff is mastered at like 24-bit 44.1. Modern pop music is often mastered that way because it's like basically with streaming in mind, they don't need anything higher than 44.1. But this will not do that. It upsamples it to 48, so you lose, the original formatting.
Sample rate conversion is the devil.
It is, and it makes things sound
really
kind of
muddies the audio stream.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I will be happy to live with like 44.1. I'm not going to be a snob and say I have to have 96 or 192, which I can't even hear the difference. 96, 24 is great. 44 is great too if it's well mastered, but it has to be played back at 44.1. And most onboard sound cards play everything at 48, above or below. So everything gets resampled as you're listening to it through the DSP. And unfortunately, this one does too. It plays back 96 fine and 48, but it's resampling anything that's 44.1. So that's the drawback. And there are products like the iFi Nano iDSD LE, which are way better for playback, but they are $50 more expensive, and it basically only does playback. You can't do capture. So if you want capture and you want to use a laptop to capture, like I was, which is pretty much essential because when the laptop was plugged in to power, I was getting a ground hum. So it needs to be something battery powered. It'll do great capture from analog sources like vinyl if you're a hipster and have vinyl records for some reason. So.
Well, I mean, the ability to directly record straight off the turntable at phono level, it's totally worth the $100.
I mean, considering otherwise you'd have to do like a separate phono preamp and then an analog to digital converter. And the ADC in this is good. It's the Cirrus Logic 5361, which is well known. It's a good chip. And it'll do like your native 2496 vinyl rips, and it sounds very, very good. And the phono preamp built into this, I don't know if it's doing it through software or how it's doing it, but it actually is very flat. It sounds good. So no complaints.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. I guess that's just me left. So I've got a pick. Where did it go?
Gosh, Jim.
Somewhere in your tabs.
I don't know what's happening. There it goes. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so it is November 7th as we're recording this. May not be when you're listening to it, but November 7th is N7 Day.
What does that mean?
Mass Effect.
Oh, man, I should really pick up that Andromeda game.
Oh, no. Yeah, so in the Mass Effect game and universe, the N7 is the designation of the Spectre soldier that you play. And so November 7th, they have N7 Day, and BioWare does some stuff, and the modding community does some stuff. They've been releasing some great mods this week. But to play the mods, you need the game. So if you haven't played the game, or if it's been several years, you want to revisit it, it's a great time to do that. You can pick up the whole trilogy for PC for $24 on disc, or you can get it digitally from Origin for I think $30. Not sure, the pricing there, but it's not bad for three of my hands down favorite games of all time. It's a wonderful sci-fi story. Each game is slightly different. One, like the first one's kind of more role playing, the second one's more action, the third's action as well, but introduces it's got more of the story.
Is that with the expansions or just the base games?
I think that's just the base game. I think you get a couple expansions in there, but I think it's just the base. But yeah, you do want to pick up the expansions. You don't need the expansions for the first game, but the ones for 2 and 3 are kind of crucial. There's some big story elements that come in those. So it's just if you haven't played it and you're a sci-fi fan, you just gotta. It's an amazing story. It's probably one of the best overall sci-fi stories ever told in gaming. And Andromeda came out last year, and it really disappointing, but at least I thought so. But the original trilogy is still great. So it's N7 Day. Go check that out. Save the galaxy, fight the Reapers, etc. All right. Well, that's the show. If you want to get in touch with us, go to pcper.com/pod, Twitter. All right. Screw this up. If you want to get in touch with us, go to twitter.com/pcper or twitter.com/Ken_Addison for this guy. Remember the underscore, unless you want to talk about Jesus.
Jesus.
Twitter.com/podcast, where you can find all our podcasts. I'm sorry. PCPro.com/podcast.
Twitter.com/podcast. I don't know what it is.
just go there.
Just go there.
See what it is. All of our writings at PCPro.com. And for all the best hard drive AMSR videos, search Josh Tech at Pornhub. And that's the show for today. We'll see you next week.
No, Jim, you need to carry this on for another minute now.
Why is that?
Because you have an ad at the end.
Oh, yeah.
No, there's not a post-roll.
No, there's no post-roll.
There's not a post-roll.
There's not?
That was a pre-roll.
Yeah.
Oh.
There's a pre and a mid.
Yeah.
Never mind. Carry on.
Cuss it up, boys.
Yeah, let's talk. What's our favorite porn hard channels now?
Oh
boy. At Podcast is a guy who calls himself Mr. Podcast. So, He's
only got 2,100 followers.
Does he talk about Jesus?
Probably.
There's always room for Jesus and Jello. We'll see you next week.